So, this is Paula Robbins with ConsciousPreneurs International. I am the founder and creator of ConsciousPreneurs, and I am so grateful today to be here with Richard Brandon. He is just a dear friend and somebody that I have grown to become so inspired by, and I just love so much of what you bring to the world. So just before I let you chime in, I want to share a little bit about my friend Richard here. Richard has been a consciouspreneur his entire adult life. He's a professional speaker. He's been a longtime hospice chaplain. He's a life purpose coach, and he's the host of just beautiful messages carried by Journey's Fire podcast. So it is my honor and my pleasure, and I'm so grateful to have you here. Welcome, Richard. Thank you.
It's my joy too, Paul. And by the way, how beautiful is it in Colorado and Denver area now?
Oh, it's such a beautiful time of year. The summer's just ending. So we're in like the 70s, 80s. It's cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
So this is a thrill for me, and thank you for reaching out. And I love what you're doing with the ConsciousPreneurs.
Thank you. It's been a really just amazing journey and roller coaster ride, to say the least. And you know, it's just beginning. And I really feel kind of the presence of how profound it is as far as what I'm kind of creating. So it's awesome.
Yes.
So thanks for being a part of that. So, you know, you've really lived a cool life that has just been fueled by so much inspiration. You've done a lot of different things, and you're kind of really in that cool space of understanding what is a consciouspreneur. So tell us a little bit, you know, kind of about your background, what led you to being on this path, how it became a professional walk for you.
Yeah, well, you know, I grew up with good parents, but service, outreach, things like that were never really modeled. But when I was a little boy, we lived in Springfield, Illinois, and we had about 20 acres of woods behind our house. And I took every opportunity imaginable to be in the woods. And so very early on, I became an environmentalist just because of my love for nature. And I think it started there because I then remember in junior high, and again, I don't know where I got this. It wasn't modeled by family members, but back in the day, Ralph Nader was pretty popular, and I became, like as a 13-year-old, a Nader Raider, looking to right the wrong in Lafayette, Indiana. That's where my dad got transferred. So from, I'd say, 7th grade on, I lived in Lafayette, Indiana, and got involved that way. But a pivotal moment for me, and I always had a heart for Dr. Martin Luther King and Gandhi, would study their lives. But I had a biology professor at Purdue University in West Lafayette. That's where I got my undergrad. Dr. L. Chiskin was a biology professor. I had heard, though, that he was involved with a group called Amnesty International, studying the biological effects of torture, and that really, really intrigued me. What also intrigued me is sometimes I would be one of those students in this large lecture hall in the back, and somehow he would hear me and my friends talk, and he would say, "You in the back, stop talking." We were mystified by that. I set an appointment with him. I'll never forget. It was in the middle of winter. It was in late afternoon. It was starting to get dark. Snow was on the ground, very cold. Long story short, he proceeded to tell me in detail in 2.5 hours how he got involved in Amnesty International. He graduated from Princeton University in 1963 with a PhD. He was a white Jewish man, thought he would do good by going down and helping Martin Luther King in Birmingham, Alabama, being a bondsman. He ended up getting abducted by some citizens of Birmingham, and for 24 to 28 hours was repeatedly tortured with a cattle prod.
Oh, man.
So that's how he lost most of his hearing. The cattle prod was stuck in his ears. He and his wife, Martha, she was also a biology professor. They had these cool 4 beautifully adopted children from around the world. And you thought, well, that was interesting. Well, they couldn't have kids. So because of that, he flipped it around and devoted the rest of his life for groups like Amnesty International. So I got involved in Amnesty, and I'd always been on a spiritual path, very broad. And so one thing led to another. Attended seminary. I got my master's in counseling from the University of Illinois. And so really all of my life, it's been about making a difference and trying to inspire as many hearts and minds as I can. And now I've refined it as I've gotten older. But yeah, most of my life has been dedicated to that. And it's been a great joy for me and an honor for me.
I love it. I love it. What a beautiful story. And what is your current professional walk? I know that you have the podcast. Are you still working as a hospice chaplain?
I am. I went back to that about 3 years ago. I was out of it for quite a while. I'd founded my own not-for-profit, Journeys Fire International. And that just was a download I got walking on a canal along Butler University. We ended up doing events. And so the biggest one I did was when I brought Deepak Chopra to Indianapolis. We had 2,100 people for that.
Wow.
The second largest was Michael Beckwith. That was in 2010. But we did a lot of those things. And I produced a CD, which is a hoot because I'm not a singer and I'm not a musician, but I was executive producer of this. It was called Sacred Romance. We have a very popular musician here in Indiana, Kathy Moore. She's a jazz violinist, full-time. She's rocking everywhere. She approached me. She loved the radio show. She said we ought to collaborate. I had no idea what I would collaborate with her on. But I had just had Coleman Barks on the show talking about Rumi. So, and then Daniel Ladinsky with Hafez. And so I thought, well, how about we take the poetry of Rumi and Hafez and score it to your original music, and let's call it Sacred Romance. So we did, and we created CDs. We used it as a fundraiser for the radio station I'm on. And I got permission from Daniel and Coleman to use their translations. And that's one of my proudest moments because I never thought I would produce a CD. And so I still have a few copies left, but that's about it. And so then we did quite a few performances. And there was just something about the power of Rumi and Hafez and the mystic poetry. You could always hear a pin drop, even if babies were in the audience. And we brought in some liturgical dancers, and our PBS affiliate filmed it. And so, my whole life, I've always been able to connect, and I don't know why. Perhaps the divine gave me a gift for that. So much of what I've done has fallen in my lap. And even being a hospice chaplain, hospice was never even on my radar. But I had been in the church for a while as a pastor, got really tired of it. And I stepped out, got a coaching certification in 1998 in life purpose coaching from the Life Purpose Institute in San Diego, California. So I'm now going back to that in terms of this new chapter in my life. I'll be using a lot of that as well. But I had a nurse friend call me and say, hey, have you ever missed shepherding people? And I thought that was an odd question, but I said, yeah, I kind of enjoy that. And she said, well, we're looking for a part-time chaplain for hospice. I said, hospice? She said, yeah, why don't you give it a try? So I did. And then one thing led to another. And so I always would stay 4 or 5 years and leave 3 or 4 years. So it's a culmination. It's been a total of over 16 years as a hospice chaplain. So that's how I got into that gig. And I'm going to be doing it for about another year or two. And then what is currently on my website, that's what I'm going to devote the rest of my life to.
Tell us about that.
Well, it's really all about speaking, which is my greatest passion, coaching / mentoring, and then, of course, the podcast. It's interesting about podcasting because so many people are doing that now, and I love the fact that it gives everybody a voice worldwide. But I still do my radio show. And once the radio show's done, then I post it on iTunes and 3 other podcast sources. So I've been at the radio station for 17 and a half years. I remember my first show was April 2nd, 2002. And my very first guest, I didn't even have a website then, but my first guest was John Robbins, and he talked about the food revolution. And my second guest was Neil Donald Walsh. Wow. And my 5th guest was Don Miguel Ruiz. I remember that because I believe the Four Agreements came out in 1997, 98. He had just had a heart attack. He was in recovery, and he came on to talk about the Four Agreements. And this was before Krista Tippett. This was before really anybody was podcasting. So sometimes I laugh when I look back on those days and see all the people that have been on the show. And I still say, wow, how is that possible? Well, thank you, God. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a hoot. Uh-huh.
Well, and I think that being in the world of consciousness in general, which is, it's such a big word. You can call it spirituality. You can call it service. The people that walk this walk are so kind and gracious, and they want to help each other. And I have, I created this expert ConsciousPreneur interview series for my members. And one of the things that I've noticed is each person that I've reached out to ask, will you, let me interview you? Can I share your story with my people? Everyone's agreed. People have been so gracious, and, it's been such an honor. So I'm not surprised that you've gotten to have these wonderful connections with such amazing souls in the world.
Well,
wonderful.
Well, thank you. What I recognize now, what it was, nobody talked about it a lot really back in the day, but it's really law of attraction. I know you've had Andy Dooley. You've talked with him. Yeah. I follow he and his brother. But it was law of attraction. And you keep your vibration high regardless of your belief system. And you're aware of your feelings. I always loved it. Wayne Dyer was one of my favorite teachers. Feel God, feel good, that whole thing. So I realized that's really what was going on. Yeah. And so things have a way of coming to you because what you put out there comes back to you. And I think looking back on my history of what I've done here in the Midwest, that's really what was happening.
Yeah. And just to speak to Wayne Dyer for a second, one of my favorite little synchronistic moments was when I got to meet him. I had gotten to see him at one of the Hay House You Can Do It conferences a few years back.
Yes.
And he was talking about his sobriety, and I'm 31 years sober. And at the time I was 26 years sober. And he had talked about his recovery. And if I'm correct, I don't know if it was February or March, but my anniversary is February 6th of 88, which is the same exact day as Wayne Dyer's sobriety date. So that day I ran down to the stage when he finished speaking, and I got to give him my 26-year coin, because I said, do you have a coin? Because I knew he hadn't been, walking the path with recovery because he was ill and he had done a few other things. And I asked him, do you have a coin? And he said, I don't. So I was able to pass my sobriety coin on to him, which was just such an incredibly huge honor.
How awesome is that?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Wasn't that cool?
Yeah. Yeah,
so,
I love it when those synchronistic moments happen like that.
Yeah. And there's more to come. I can't wait to see what unfolds,
Yes.
I just so look forward to the mystery and just so embrace it. So
absolutely.
So, I've also had the opportunity to work with some transition counseling in my field as a hypnotherapist and a healer. I've had that beautiful honor to work with some families and those who were close to transition. And so your work in hospice is something that I just so deeply honor. Can you share with us perhaps one of your more impactful memories, something that really just stood out in your hospice career?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a couple. I'll share one for the sake of time, because it touched my heart so much. That's why I think I always remember it. It was a couple of years ago, and I was notified about the death of a hospice patient that we had in a nursing facility, and was asked to share that news to the patient's 89-year-old boyfriend. Isn't that cool? She was elderly too. And they had this beautiful they would shuffle down the hall, beach in their walkers, and they just adored each other. He lived at the facility, so I went there. But I remember like it was yesterday, I was sitting across from him, and his hand was in mine, and there were tears flowing down his face. And I think seeing this beautiful little old man who lost his love, he didn't have a lot of family visiting him, so I knew that also. And saw those tears, it caused my eyes to tear up too. So he wasn't completely surprised by the news. He took it well, but he still said, and I'll never forget this, he said, but my heart still hurts. And I thought, oh. And then he looked up at me and he shared how his dog had just passed away earlier. And I looked in the corner of the room and there was a dog's crate and a few toys. He wasn't willing to let all that go yet. And I thought, here's this poor man who had this beautiful love late in the late 80s for both of them, and his dog both die within a couple of weeks. But I remember this. I remember he asked if it was okay to cry for his dog as well. And I remember when he said that, he held my hand tight. I know, I still get emotional. He held my hand tighter. And then I know the tears were falling down my face. But I remember saying, absolutely, and I'll cry with you. Mm-hmm. And nothing else was said, because in that moment, no other words were needed. What was cool about that, and I remember this, I often have a great memory, but I do love quotes. And Andre Nguyen's been one of my favorite writers and teachers, long since passed away. But he wrote in one of his books, he said, be present to each other and experience in the depths the gift of life. To care means being where the suffering is. It's a way of living together so the mystery of life is revealed. And that moment will stay with me all my days in this life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is why I wanted you to talk with me. I just knew you and I share a very similar love for the quotes, and I think just a real strong resonance for the way spirit affects life. And you know, you've got a lot of years working with the cycle of life and death. What has become one of the most important messages for you personally to carry in the world?
Yeah, that's another great question. Well, you know what? Speaking of quotes, and I'm sure all your listeners know this one, but it's one of my favorites, and it's Ram Dass, we're all walking each other home. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what instantly, hearing your question, what instantly comes to my mind. We truly are all walking each other home, because death is the most democratic thing on the face of the earth. It's going to take all of us. Mm-hmm. And I find that enlightening when I think about that. I mean, that is so true. And I've realized that the reality of death, and I don't know, I guess what I would say, the importance of what it means to be alive, are intimately weaved together by love. And I've seen that more clearly the longer I've been doing work like this, and then the other consciousness work I've done. It's almost like the divine is giving me this download. Everything I've read, people I've talked to, it's all starting to come together in this quiet knowing dropping from my head, which is knowledge, into my heart, which is illumination. And so, and it's changed me, and it is changing me. And so that's what I would say. We're all just walking each other home. And man, it's all about love, you know, life, death. And Journey's Fire, the podcast, it used to be, the tagline was bringing love to life. And I'd have these singers, songwriters, activists, authors, people like that on the show. But now it's conversations on living, loving, and dying. I'm including that as well. And I like that. It feels right for who I am right now. Yeah. So, but that's what I've learned and am learning in this cycle of life and death that we're all on. Yeah.
I agree. I mean, that's earnestly one of the things that led me down this path to create this movement for ConsciousPreneurs was the loss of a friendship. And it wasn't a death, but it was a death of sorts. And it was also quite an awakening. And I look at that as the circle of life. And it really, when you go through a deep loss, it can awaken such a new chapter of your life, you know? So I absolutely agree. And my walk has changed. I'm walking, you know, with a completely new purpose. And we're all just walking each other home. So I love it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would imagine that the people that are following you through ConsciousPreneurs could probably give testimony to the same thing. The longer you're at this, the more you're involved in the world and in people's lives, you start evolving, you start changing, you start heading down paths you never thought you would head down. But it's all perfect. And I just think it's beautiful. We're open to that.
I do too. It's been really just rewarding and fulfilling and challenging and frustrating. all
It's
of
all of it,
the whole
yes.
circle. Yeah, yeah.
Life is both juicy and messy at the same
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
Yeah,
So let's talk about your podcast for a second.
yeah,
So you said it started, was it 17 years ago that you started like a radio show? Now you call it a
yes.
podcast?
Well, it's still radio show locally because I air at noon on the radio station, but then we podcast it around noon. Actually, it's the night before, and podcasts are on for eternity. So,
Yeah.
yeah, but I just started that in February, and so we grabbed some of the older shows, not all of them, because that was a lot, although they're all on CD, and put them on there. But I love that because you can reach a wider audience as well. So, but I still love the radio station. I still love going in there. They've got a lot of studios there, and I have an engineer that I work with, and that way I don't have to mess with the editing. But at some point, like many of you, like you're doing as well, Paula, I want that complete freedom where then I can podcast from home or anywhere I'm at. And get the voice out. So, but right now it's with the radio station, and 17 years of the most delightful conversations, and through that I've even met some of the people that have come on the show, and that's been a thrill too. But I always tell people, talking about spirituality, that I have two sanctuaries now at this stage in my life. My first sanctuary is nature. I mean, the woods, river, ocean, mountain, doesn't matter. I can't get enough of it. The second sanctuary is the radio studio, because there, and most of my guests are national or international, so it's phone. And like what we're doing right now, there's something very intimate about two people really listening to one another, listening, feeling the vibration of each other's voice. And other people happen to be audio voyeurs, just kind of listening in, looking in. And I love the intimacy that I have with my radio guests, and I've cherished that. So, and I'm sure you've recognized that too with the work you're doing now and the conversations you're doing.
Well, it's created such a beautiful, deeper bond with the people that you meet with. You get to know each other, and the people that I've gotten to interview, Andy Dooley, yourself, you befriend them. We are all just walking each other home, and it's just been a really cool ride. And I feel like you and I have kind of become friends over these recent months of just kind of following each other's content and seeing such a resonance.
Absolutely.
So, I love
Absolutely. Me too. And thank God for social media. Yeah, it can be used for negative ways too, but the gift is we do live in a small world now. So you and I have connected, and we do follow each other almost daily. And you and I are also following so many other people, so many beautiful souls doing magnificent work out in the world. I just think that's amazing.
It's been, just by stepping into the space of choosing to, one, create a collaborative and a movement and a connection of this, conscious entrepreneur, but also moving into that space of creating content to teach and coach and intuitively guide any one of them who will allow that guidance. My awareness of where the consciousness is has expanded tremendously. It's been really cool.
Absolutely. And the teachers are everywhere. People will ask me, well, who were your greatest teachers? Well, first, life is probably our greatest teacher. But I still find that it's often children. They teach me some of the most profound things. The hospice patients that I have companioned over the 16 and a half years, because they really taught me what's most important in life, about life and love. And then I would say the radio guests, because I choose them. And oftentimes I'm choosing them because I really want to have a conversation with them. Oh, I got a radio show. There's a purpose why I can have them on. And maybe they're selling a book or something, but that's cool because I want to read the book. Or maybe it's an album that they've just put out, like Michael Franti and people like that. But I'll learn from them as well. And that's why I said earlier that all of a sudden, just in this last year, it's like everything is finally coming together. The knowledge and such that I have learned along the way, and all the various spiritualities that I taste and practice in my own way, have all kind of come together in more of a simple way for me. And so I'm probably more comfortable in my skin now than I've ever been my entire life. And I love that.
Yeah, I can easily say the same. So let's talk about your work as a speaker. So there's so many people who have a message to carry in the world, and they've got a heart of service. And many of them want to move into that space of becoming a speaker or carrying their message further, whether it's through speaking, podcasts, courses, whatever. Tell me, how did you get started as a speaker, and kind of what's that path look like for you now?
Well, I guess I got started in junior high when I auditioned for my first musical. Again, I was always in my own little world. When I was young, I remember thinking I don't fit into this world. And that's kind of an odd thing for a kid to feel, but that's how I was. And somehow I stumbled in. I happened to go to a really big and very cool high school too, in junior high, that had all these opportunities. And even in the 70s, we had a radio and TV station. So I just gravitated to that and realized I had a gift for that. And so I started that way. Professionally, I think when I was a pastor, people would hear me speak, and then they'd ask me to speak at a conference or for a business or corporation. But it started taking off in the Midwest when I started hospice years ago. And a friend of mine who was a marketer, and he knew that I was pretty good at speaking, wanted to take me with him to start this new hospice. It was a national company, but never been in Indiana. So we opened up, I helped him open up all these offices in Indiana. What we would do is we would secure the finest restaurant. We invite docs, social workers, nurses for free meal, and I would speak. And then Jeff Lang was his name, who tragically died at the age of 50 just about 3 months ago. Talking about awareness of death and what it teaches about life. But what would happen is people would be so inspired. They would say, well, hey, I'm a member of a big conference coming up and we're looking for a keynoter. Would you like to do that? I mean, it fell in my lap like the rest of the stuff in my life. And so I said, sure. So I didn't market at all. I didn't know how to market, so I didn't market. So I spoke mostly Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, in central part of the country, because that's where a lot of the conferences were and the people that I would meet. The Governor's Council on Aging, International Association of Esoteric Healers, that one was in Grand Rapids, Michigan. A variety of different people, but and I think this is on my new website now, but what I learned through those years by people coming to me, because to be honest, the only 2 times I ever feel totally used of God or the divine is when I'm speaking to a group and you get that download and it just comes out. Because I believe the only reason why I'm still here, because I've had a couple of things that have happened in my life where I probably should have died or not been here, was to inspire as many hearts and minds. So it's all about, for me, inspiring the fire within to help people's hearts awaken to a greater passion for life, love, and work. And so that's what I've been about all my life. That's what I'm harnessing now on this new website. So I'm just now getting ready to market across the country, because before I was a single parent, still raising 4 children. They're all young adults now. Pretty busy guy, didn't want to even travel that far, but all these things came to me so I could fly or even drive to many of them, and had the best time. And so I got away from that when I started this not-for-profit, and it took off faster than I thought. And the only reason we got Deepak is because, again, here's connection. Sister Judy in Brightonback, who she would always have a special place in my heart. She died 5 years ago at the age of 82. She was a nun, but she also had a bachelor's and master's in nursing. And she was way ahead of her time. She was close friends with Deepak and Rita Chopra and would travel with them. Well, I met her when I did a talk in South Bend, Indiana. She lived in LaPorte, Indiana. And she came up to me. She looked like a Mother Teresa, very thin, but very feisty. And she looked at me and she said, I felt your thunderbolts of love coming my way. thunderbolts of love. And I just started laughing because I knew she was a nun. Of course, I found out later she loves men, so that was fun. But she was the only reason we got Deepak. And then I had another philanthropist that I met through a friend, just casual meeting, who wanted to come on. He funded the whole thing. I mean, that's how things have just happened. So here I am now saying, okay, I'm sitting on all these connections that I made over the years. I'm ready to do that. So I'm slowly getting my foot back into the door to then eventually fly and just do that, do the coaching and speaking and of course the podcasting. So,
right.
But I'm really enjoying the hospice right now too, because I know this is my last stint with this. And again, it just teaches me so much of what's most important right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. So kind of big picture, as you reflect back and you look at your life personally, professionally, what can you say has been the most fulfilling, like, reward or contribution that you know that you've made in the world? Toot your horn. What have you really felt the most honor in serving?
Well, first of all, let me say, as an interviewer, these are great questions. So good job, Paula.
Thanks. I've done quite a few of these over the years.
Yeah. I would say two things clearly. One are my kids, because I have 4 amazing kids, 2 boys, 2 girls, all successful in what they do, all have happy lives. And sometimes I tear up just thinking about that. Yeah. And they all support one another. My youngest now lives in Seattle, and the others here in the central Indiana area. But it's that, and they're healthy and all that. The second thing is that broader thing. I look about the body of work that I've been able to do and still continue to do, but inspiring hearts and minds, because people need and want to be inspired. And I believe I'm just one of many, many voices out there in the world that are able to do that. And so I'm most proud of that. People who are maybe beating themselves up, people who might be showing up at a conference I'm speaking at and they don't know why. And I've heard that a lot. I've collected a lot of those emails and such, where they would say, wow, you're the reason why I came there. Mm-hmm. And I save those and I look back on those. And so I guess in general, those are the 2 things I'm most proud of in my life right now.
I love it. I love it. So is there anything in specific that you've got in the works right now? How can we support you? Is there anything that we can contribute to you to support you for the time that you've so graciously contributed here? Yeah,
you can support me seriously with great thoughts and energy, because as much as I can speak in front of a very large group with like, hey, 5 minutes, can you do this talk? Yes. I have never written a book. So I am slowly writing a book, and that's what's in the works. And that's what I could use all the great mojo and energy with. And so I'm collecting the stories and such. And then my friend Donna Mosier, who I've known for eons, she used to be an editor for Science of Mind magazine. She's been trying to convince me that the first book should be transcripts of my radio show, because that's what Krista Tippett has done and Fresh Air has done. And so that might be the first one, because I've been doing that, getting transcriptions. But my heart and soul is a book that I'm calling Art of Living in Light of Death, Why Awareness of Death is the Secret of Life. Because that's still my favorite message. I got 5 keynotes that I market. That's still my favorite one that I love to do. Mm-hmm. And so that's the project that I have that's the biggest. And as I go through any layers of fear that might be coming up in terms of writing things down. And so, yes, I've had friends say, well, just tape record it. Because my all-time great teacher, and some of your listeners might not know this person, he died in 1998, but I actually did a radio interview with him 2 months before he died, and that was Dr. Leo Buscaglia. And most of Leo's books, he wrote 15. At one time, 5 of his books were in the top 10 New York Times bestseller list. They were all on love. And so he was known as Dr. Love. He was a Wayne Dyer of his time on PBS. Crazy Italian, would do all the wrong things as a speaker. He'd spit in the mic. He'd throw his coat on the ground. But people, get this, Paula. Back in the day, no cable, no internet, anything. He would go to Chicago for a 1-hour lecture. 10,000 people would show up. Wow. And then they would stay 2 hours. If you YouTube him, Dr. Leo Buscaglia, check him out. To this day, he's my favorite teacher because of his passion and his authenticity. But most of his books, that was my point of bringing this up, were transcriptions of his lectures. And so I'm trying to do a little both. Sit down and think about the stories and write them, and also record more of my talks that I'm giving.
Well, I'll just give you my 2 cents just based on this conversation alone, is that it's going to come to you so smoothly and easily, not just because you've sent that out and requested, please give me some good love and vibe and support, but that's your track record, my friend. You've had things come to you. You've had things that have landed. So the way that this is going to flow is going to snap into place with ease and with grace, and I promise.
Wow. Well, as a Pisces and empath, you're bringing tears to my eyes. So thank you for that encouragement. Thank you very much. I just wrote that down.
You bet. So for my group, is there any piece of advice that you would offer as a consciouspreneur, consciouspreneur to consciouspreneur? What's something that you would offer them as here's my greatest 2 cents as a person and professional?
Yeah. Here's what it would be, and here's what I'm learning, because a good part of my life, even doing some of the things I shared about, I was doing a lot of good badly. And I got tired and I got exhausted, and I came down with amnesia in 2010, December 15th.
Wow.
And I know that, I mean, God had to take my brain away to stop me from thinking. And it happened to be one of those years where I was doing full-time hospice. I was doing a radio show. We had Michael Beckwith's assistant call me. He was ready to come to Indianapolis. We had put a feeler in a couple years before, but I think they heard about the Deepak event, which went well. I agreed to do that, thinking it would have been an easy sell. It wasn't. But it still got pulled off. And Unity of Indianapolis, a church here, I taught a lot in New Thought churches, asked me to consider being their pastor, which I agreed to. But then I found out that they needed 2 ordained Unity people in part of the mix. I eventually pulled my name out because I went to another seminary, but I wasn't Unity ordained. So anyway, it was a crazy busy year. I shouldn't have done as much as I did. Long story short, I'm leading yet another meeting, because that's what Richard does, trying to do good in the community. I don't remember it. I end up in the hospital, and I was out for 17 hours with amnesia. They call it transient global amnesia. Stress. I know it was stress. But 2 things happened. And again, long story short, when I first woke up, and I had a friend there, I had called their number, and they came, and they had called my kids. All 4 kids were sitting, against the wall. And when they left, all of a sudden I started thinking about a guest that I had on the show. He was an international president of Unity, and now he does consciousness and business stuff. A guy who I love dearly, Tom Zinder is his name. And he was part of a leadership council that Deepak and all the others are in California be a part of. But all of a sudden, I started laughing uncontrollably, and I said, well, who made him a consciousness leader? What about that little old lady I saw in the nursing home last week with those blue eyes drawing me in, and such wisdom she had? I mean, I was laughing. And what I saw in that moment, it was like a 1-2 punch. And that first punch was, oh my God, our spirituality, we're all just a breath away from a Saturday Night Live skit. So let go, Richard. Don't take this stuff so seriously, because, events, if you do a big event, that's serious. Ticket sales, you got to pay the speaker, all this and that. That happened after my friend left, and there was that beautiful half hour of calm in a hospital, and I happened to have room to myself. That's when the voice spoke to me. And I believe the divine speaks to us every day. I know you do too. But there's been 8 times now when divine, I call it God, has spoken to me, and it wasn't audible, but it felt like it. It was almost like a mother-father energy whispering gently in my ear, and it's always in phrases, and then I get the download for the phrase. No, it's been 7 times, and I never know when it's going to happen. But this time, the voice said, stop. It's time to stop. And all of a sudden, what came to me, and then tears rolled down my face, exhaustion. Exhaustion came out. And what I heard is stop planning, stop strategizing, stop marketing, stop. By the time I got home, I felt like my head had spiritual surgery. I had quite a few days off, clearly because of that. I should have taken more. But there was a book on my shelf, true story, that I bought it when it first came out. I started to open it up, didn't really get into it, put it back on the shelf. And I felt led to pick up that book and read it. So I did. I read it in a day. I read it day and then that night. And the book was Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle, Question and Answers. And so ever since then, some of my favorite human teachers have actually been non-duality teachers. Amanda McPherson, Jeff Foster, people like that, as well as some of the New Thought teachers as well. But that's what that health scare caused me to try to be mindful every day. Don't get caught up in all of it. Just be present. And sometimes if I find myself getting caught up in the energy, I'll say to myself playfully, Richard, stop. It's time to stop. And that's helped me get in this total place of peace almost as much as I can every day, which has been amazing. But I've had to do a lot of deep work to get there, as you well know. And I had to have my head taken away. I had my friends joking that proved that I was a head case. So but I don't ever want to go through that. I don't ever want to do good badly. I want to do good and peacefully. But like you said, it'll just flow and it'll come to you. And that's what I'm learning now in my life. There you go.
Well, I think that's a lesson I've learned over and over. I have a very similar health scare. It was in 2001 and I lost my motor skills for 3.5 weeks.
Whoa.
Yeah. And, they did all the testing and the diagnostics and the MRIs and the blood work, and they couldn't diagnose anything. And they ended up with, the kind of catch-all diagnosis was atypical migraines. But my reflection on that, because I had a full recovery, I came back to, I never lost my mental faculties, but I couldn't type, I couldn't walk, I couldn't get my words out. The reflection of that experience was so profound in not just be present, but be mindful that you don't have to do it all, that there is support, there is divinity, God is there, and you are supported and loved and protected and guided, and don't forget it,
Yes,
know?
absolutely.
So, yeah.
And I can't imagine what you were going through, what you were feeling and thinking when you were in the midst of that.
Oh,
wow.
I was a single mom 24/7 with my 2 daughters at the time. And it was terrifying,
Yeah.
So I'm really grateful that I have it as hindsight,
Yes.
that I literally got through it, because it was just an amazing, beautiful story now of self-awareness and daily ritual of making sure I set my foundation with prayer and, meditation, because that is what keeps my stress in check. That is what keeps my pathway in check.
Absolutely.
And it's not that I never falter. I'm human, but I give myself about a 97% of the time. I make sure my days start with that foundation, and it helps me to be more present.
Yes.
So we're definitely on the same page with that, as far as if you want to have advice on your marketing or your bookkeeping or who's the, next big product you're going to create, stop, get present, go inward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Know you're guided, and you don't just have to figure it out. There's a download waiting.
Well, and find what you're passionate about too, because there was a time in my life when I was really very involved in New Thought type stuff that I think I was unconsciously trying to be the next Wayne Dyer, trying to be that. And it took me quite a while to finally find a place where I'm to be, is this whole death awareness, art of living in light of death stuff. But here's what I would also share with those listening. And I do this every day, and I shared this actually with the hospice team. And that's this. I every day ask God to set my heart on fire. Actually, it came from John Wesley back in the 1700s. He was a founder of the Methodist Church. And he had all these great revivals breaking out. And a reporter from a village came up and wanted to know the secret. And he said this. He said, I simply ask God to set my heart on fire, and people come to watch it burn. And so I have found when I'm on stage, for example, and people feel that fire, they feel that, and then it touches them and it awakens something in them. That's really what led into then another keynote. And so I'm going to take the words you gave me earlier about the book. Same way with the book. Let that go, have the fire, get the vision, get the download, and this watch it and allow it to unfold step by step. Mm-hmm. So yeah, nothing better than that.
I completely agree. So tell us the name of your podcast again.
Yeah, the name of the podcast is Journey Spire with Richard Brendan. You can go to iTunes and find it, or you can go to my website, richardbrendan.com, and it's on there as well. And there'll be a link to not only iTunes, but the 3 other podcast sources. So
no mistake in naming that.
Yeah, exactly. Learned a few things along the way.
Yeah, I love it. Cool. Yeah. Well, I cannot tell you how much I've just enjoyed our visit, and I've enjoyed just hanging with you and talking spirit and consciouspreneurialism, and just thank you. It's just been a pleasure.
Well, it's been my joy also, and an honor that you asked me. Thank you so much, and I love what you're doing.
Thank you. And we'll stay in touch. I'm sure that I'll be seeing you, and you'll be seeing kind of the things that I'm up to. And
absolutely.
Thank you again, Richard. What a pleasure.
Blessings.
Blessings to you.